The rain drummed softly against the window pane, a rhythmic, almost hypnotic sound that filled the otherwise silent room. A faint glow from the street lamp outside flickered against the glass, distorted by beads of water sliding down in uneven trails. It was late, later than I had realized, but time always slipped away when I was alone like this. I stretched, feeling the tension ease from my shoulders as I stepped out of the bathroom, steam curling around me, clinging to my bare skin before dispersing into the cool air. A towel hung loosely around my waist, the damp fabric sticking slightly as I moved toward my dresser. I was alone in the apartment. My roommate, Evan, had mentioned something about a late shift at the bar. I hadn't paid much attention, too focused on my own exhaustion, the pull of sleep just within reach. The night had been uneventful, exactly how I liked it. The soft hum of the city outside, distant car horns and murmured voices, all felt like white noise against the quiet of my room. Everything was routine, predictable, safe. And then, a sound. Faint but distinct. A shift in the air. A barely there creak of wood that sent a slow, crawling sensation up my spine. I froze, towel still clutched in one hand, my other reaching instinctively for my phone on the nightstand. My fingers brushed the cool metal, but I hesitated. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was nothing. A stray gust of wind, the building settling, Evan coming home earlier than expected. But something felt off. The air held a weight it hadn't before, as if I wasn't entirely alone anymore. My skin prickled, still damp from the shower, but now the chill that spread through me wasn't from the cold. I turned slowly, scanning the dimly lit room. My closet door was slightly ajar. Had it been that way before? A whisper of movement. Barely visible in the sliver of darkness beyond the closet's opening, a shadow shifted. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was there. The room seemed to shrink around me, the weight of the darkness pressing in. My pulse pounded at the base of my throat, my grip tightening around the towel knotted at my waist. I wasn't alone. I could see the faintest shift in the closet's shadows, a presence too still to be natural, too deliberate to be a trick of the light. A silhouette, just barely visible through the narrow gap between the doors. My throat felt dry. I should have shouted, should have lunged for my phone, should have done something other than stand there, naked, vulnerable, and frozen in place. But I didn't. Instead, I took a step forward. The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken tension, each slow footfall sending a jolt of anticipation up my spine. My voice, when it finally came, was hoarse and quiet. "Who's there?" Silence. For a moment I thought I might have imagined it, that my mind was playing tricks on me in the dim light. But then, movement. A sharp inhale. The smallest shuffle of feet against the hardwood floor. My breath hitched as the closet door creaked open an inch wider. A figure emerged from the shadows. The man was tall, lean but broad-shouldered, his features obscured by the hood of his sweatshirt. Even in the low light, I caught the glint of his eyes, sharp and assessing, watching me just as carefully as I was watching him. His breathing was controlled, measured. Too calm for someone who had just been caught. "Don't move," he said. His voice was deep, low, sending a ripple of something through me that I wasn't prepared to name. I should have been terrified. I should have been screaming, reaching for something, anything, that I could use as a weapon. Instead, I stood there, rooted to the spot, heart hammering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "Who are you?" I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. He didn't answer. Instead, he took a slow step forward, emerging fully into the dim glow from the street lamp outside. The hood cast part of his face in shadow, but I could make out the sharp cut of his jaw, the faintest hint of stubble. He wasn't some faceless criminal lurking in the night. He was young, maybe my age, and something about the way he carried himself told me he wasn't as sure of himself as he wanted to seem. "What do you want?" I asked, forcing steel into my voice. Another moment of silence, and then, "I don't know." His answer was so unexpected, so strange, that I faltered. "You don't know?" A flicker of something crossed his expression. Uncertainty? Hesitation? He took another step forward. Instinctively, I took one back, my calves hitting the edge of my bed. My pulse was erratic now, my brain at war with itself, half screaming at me to run, half anchored in place by the weight of something I couldn't explain. "I wasn't supposed to be here this long," he muttered, more to himself than to me. My eyes flicked toward my nightstand, where my phone lay just out of reach. If I could just grab it. He must have noticed because in an instant, he moved. "Don't." I barely had time to react before he was in front of me, too close, his presence overwhelming. The towel at my waist felt suddenly, painfully inadequate. His scent hit me, something clean, sharp, a mix of rain and the faintest trace of cologne. Not the smell of a desperate thief. "You're not just here to rob me, are you?" I asked, my voice quieter now, more measured. He exhaled slowly, his eyes flickering with something unreadable. "No." A shiver ran down my spine, though not entirely from fear. I should have pushed him away. I should have shoved past him, made a break for the door, done anything but what I did next. Instead, I stayed still. Something about the way he looked at me, the way his gaze flickered down for the briefest second, lingering, conflicted, made my stomach twist in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "Then why are you here?" His jaw tensed. "I made a mistake." His voice was lower now, almost hoarse, and for the first time, I saw something crack in his expression. The careful control wavered, just slightly, revealing a glimpse of something beneath. Regret. Guilt. Something else. He clenched his fists, as if warring with himself, and then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he turned. My heart lurched as he strode toward the window, his movements swift and decisive. "Wait!" I didn't know why I said it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was adrenaline. Maybe it was something deeper, something I wasn't ready to name. He paused, one foot already on the ledge. For the first time, he fully looked at me. His hood had fallen back slightly, revealing more of his face, dark eyes, sharp cheekbones, lips pressed into a firm line. He was handsome in a way that felt dangerous, like something that could burn if I got too close. "Forget this happened," he said, voice softer now, but no less intense. And then, he was gone. The room was silent again. The only evidence that he had been here at all was the faint scent of him still lingering in the air, the ghost of his presence burned into my memory. I exhaled, my legs finally giving out as I sat heavily on the bed. My hands were shaking. I should have felt relief. I should have been dialing the police. But instead, all I could do was stare at the empty space where he had stood, my mind replaying every second of what had just happened. Because the truth was, deep down, beneath the fear and confusion, I wanted to see him again. I didn't sleep that night. Even long after he had disappeared, his presence lingered, an imprint in the air, in my mind, in the way my skin still tingled from the proximity of him. I kept replaying every second, every glance, every word he had said. I made a mistake. And then he was gone. I should have been relieved. Instead, all I felt was a strange, aching curiosity. Who was he? And why did I feel like I knew him? I didn't move from the bed for what felt like hours. The rain had stopped by now, leaving behind a heavy stillness, the city outside a quiet hum of distant sirens and headlights slicing through the darkness. My apartment was silent. Too silent. I didn't even realize I had dozed off until the sound of something shifting in the hallway jolted me awake. I sat up, pulse spiking. The room was bathed in faint moonlight, shadows stretching long against the walls. I held my breath, straining to listen. There it was again. A soft scrape. A footstep. Someone was inside. Again. Every nerve in my body went rigid. I turned my head toward the window, locked. The front door? Still shut. I wasn't alone. A shadow moved in the doorway. I barely had time to react before the figure stepped forward, and I felt my breath catch sharply in my throat. Him. The same sharp eyes. The same hooded sweatshirt, damp now, the fabric clinging to his body. He wasn't just a memory or some fever dream from earlier. He was here. You, my voice broke. He lifted a hand. Wait. I didn't move. I should have been terrified. He had broken in again. This was different. More deliberate. More dangerous. But all I could feel was the pounding in my chest, the heat rushing through me in a way that had nothing to do with fear. I shouldn't have come back, he murmured, voice barely above a whisper. His gaze flickered over me, over my bare chest, my parted lips, the towel still wrapped around my waist, looser now. My skin prickled under his stare, heat pooling low in my stomach in a way I couldn't control. Then why did you? I shot back, forcing steel into my voice. A pause. A hesitation. Then, I don't know. But he did. I could see it in the way he swallowed, his jaw tightening as if he was fighting something off, as if being here was dangerous for him too. My breath came short. I wasn't sure if I moved first or if he did, but suddenly the space between us felt impossibly small. The air was thick, charged, like an exposed wire sparking between us. Tell me the truth. He exhaled, slow, measured. I thought I could just take what I needed and leave, he admitted, his voice low, rough around the edges. His eyes flickered with something dark. But then I saw you. A shiver ran down my spine. So what? I challenged, but my voice was weaker now, breathless. You decided to come back for more? His hand twitched at his side. I had the sudden, dizzying urge to close the distance, to touch him, to push him and see what he would do. Instead, he took a step forward. You're not afraid of me, he murmured. I swallowed hard. No. That was the problem. I wasn't. Should I be? He didn't answer. Instead, his gaze dropped again, lower this time, lingering at the dip of my collarbone, the slow rise and fall of my chest. My breath caught. And then, his fingers grazed my wrist. Barely a touch. Just enough for my pulse to spike, for the air to shatter between us. I sucked in a sharp breath, my skin burning under his fingertips. He hesitated, but only for a second, before pressing in, just slightly, his grip tightening. It was nothing. And yet it wasn't. It was everything. I should have pulled away. I should have shoved him, screamed, called the cops, done anything but what I did next. Instead, I let my body sway forward, barely closing the space between us. His breathing hitched. His other hand lifted, slowly, like he wasn't sure if he was making a mistake, until his fingertips brushed the side of my jaw. Light. Hesitant. Like he was testing something dangerous, something he wasn't sure he wanted to admit. My heart slammed against my ribs. I was losing control. Tell me to stop, he whispered. I couldn't. I didn't. Instead, I turned my face just slightly, enough that his fingers grazed the corner of my lip. His breath came short. And then, a noise. Loud. A car door slamming outside, voices rising. We broke apart like a snapped wire, electricity sparking between us before the space caved in. He pulled back first, his hand jerking away like he had been burned. His chest was rising and falling fast, his lips slightly parted like he had almost said something but had stopped himself. I have to go. The spell shattered. I blinked, still breathless, still dazed, and suddenly he was stepping back, heading for the window again. I moved without thinking, reaching for him, grabbing his wrist before he could disappear. Wait! His body tense. You'll see me again, he murmured, but it wasn't a promise. It was a warning. And then, before I could say anything else, he was gone, leaving me standing there, heart racing, body burning, head spinning, unsure if what had just happened was real. I lifted a hand to my lips. I could still feel the ghost of his touch, the warmth of his breath. And despite everything, I wanted more. I didn't move for a long time after he left. The air was still thick, charged with something I wasn't ready to name. My skin felt too warm, my pulse too fast, my breath uneven. I ran a hand over my face, trying to ground myself, but all I could think about was him. The weight of his stare, the heat of his touch, the way I hadn't pulled away. I should have. I should have. Instead, I had let it happen. I had wanted it to happen. And that terrified me. I finally forced myself to move, crossing the room to lock the window, this time for real. My fingers trembled against the latch. It felt useless. He had found his way in twice. If he wanted to, he could do it again. That thought sent a shiver through me, though not entirely from fear. I stepped back, running a hand through my hair, trying to gather my thoughts. But the moment I turned, my reflection caught my eye. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My skin was flushed, my lips slightly parted, my eyes wide and unfocused. My towel was hanging loose at my waist, like it had been ready to fall at any moment. Like I had been ready to let it. I squeezed my eyes shut. What the hell is wrong with me? But I already knew the answer. I wanted to see him again. Even after everything, the break-in, the danger, the way I should have been terrified, I wanted more. I wanted answers. I wanted him. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The next day, I barely left my apartment. I told myself I was being cautious, that I was waiting to see if he would come back. But the truth was, I didn't know what I'd do if he did. Would I push him away this time? Would I demand the answers I deserved? Or would I do something worse? Something reckless, something I couldn't take back? Days passed and he didn't return. But he was everywhere. Every shadow in my apartment felt like him. Every creak of the floorboards made my pulse spike. Every time I passed by my window at night, I half expected to see him standing there, watching me, waiting. And then, one night, I did. It was raining again, the city outside blurred through streaks of water on the glass. I had been pacing my apartment, restless, unable to shake the weight of him from my thoughts. And then I felt it, that pull. I turned to the window, heart slamming into my ribs. And there he was, standing just beyond the street lamp's glow, hood pulled up, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Watching. Waiting. My breath caught. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The distance between us felt impossibly vast and dangerously small all at once. The rain dripped from the edge of his hood, running in thin rivulets down his face. His jaw was tight, his eyes unreadable. But he was there. I stepped forward, my hand hovering over the window latch. "What are you doing?" I didn't know. All I knew was that if I opened that window, if I let him in again, there would be no going back. I hesitated. And then, he turned. No words. No signals. Nothing. He just turned and disappeared into the night, leaving me standing there, hands still hovering, heart still pounding, mind spinning with the one unbearable, unshakable thought. This isn't over. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, standing in the rain, watching me, leaving without a word. I kept replaying the moment in my head, trying to make sense of it. Why did he come back if he was just going to leave again? And why did it feel like he was waiting for me to stop him? By morning, I was exhausted, my body heavy with unanswered questions. I forced myself to go about my day like normal, showering, dressing, making coffee. But everything felt off. The air in my apartment felt different. Charged. Like he was still here somehow. And then I noticed it. The window. I froze. It was unlocked. I was sure, so sure, that I had locked it after he left the first time. My hands trembled as I reached out, pressing my fingers against the glass. The latch was undone. Just slightly. Just enough. A cold shiver ran through me. I turned slowly, scanning the apartment. The door was still locked, the chain undisturbed. But something felt wrong. Had I really forgotten to lock it? Or had he been here again, while I was sleeping? My pulse hammered as I moved carefully through the space, checking every corner, every shadow. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place. But that only made it worse. If he had come back, he hadn't come to steal anything. He had come for something else. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Then I saw it. A piece of paper. Sitting on my nightstand, placed deliberately where I couldn't miss it. My breath caught as I stepped closer, my fingers hesitant as I picked it up. One sentence, scrawled in sharp, messy handwriting. You should have stopped me. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed, my head spinning. What does that mean? I should have stopped him from breaking in? From touching me? From leaving? Or did he mean something else entirely? My fingers tightened around the note, my heart slamming against my ribs. This wasn't over. It had never been over. And now I wasn't sure if I wanted it to be.